I feel a little nervous about doing this video. I feel like I might scatter some dreams, but also give a little bit of hope. Today, I wanted to explore renting versus buying in 2020 and life in general. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Patricia Bright. You are over here on The Break, where we are giving you the tools to learn, grow, and navigate life like a boss and make money moves in the process. I hope you are doing well. So today we are going to attack something that is an age-old principle. You need to own a home. Renting is for losers. Renting is just paying off somebody else's mortgage. It is wise to be a homeowner. Today I really want to reflect on if that is true, or have our aunties, uncles, and everyone been lying to us this entire time? I saw, and I'm sure some of you guys have seen, that Elon Musk has doubled down on his own promise to own no houses, and he sold 5 of his mansions. Why he had 5 mansions, I do not know. I'm sure he has more than that. Over $29 million on one house. Yeah, he is selling everything that he owns and he wants to become a renter. What does this billionaire know that we don't know? Dum, dum, dum. There's something brewing in the water. Today, I want to explore the idea of renting versus buying and what is actually the best option to do in the long run. I feel like a lot of us are in this mindset, including myself. I do consider myself a homeowner, but that home owning is the most important thing that anybody could ever do in their lives. People want to get on the house ladder. They want to get one house, then they get a bigger house, they get a bigger house, and they get a bigger house, and then have a mortgage until death. Yes, mortgage means until death. Yes, mortgage. Mort dead, gauge, don't know. But yeah, today I wanted to explore the concept of being a homeowner being the most important thing, and also renting being a waste of money, and really look at what is the cost versus the benefit of each of the options out there. And I have a feeling that some of you guys might be surprised, and probably not many people want you to know this. So firstly, I thought I'd go into some stats about home ownership across the world. In the UK and US, you have about 65% of the population who are homeowners, and that leaves another 35% of the population who are renters in the UK and the US. However, across Europe, the stats on home ownership vary significantly. Germany having one of the lower rates of home ownership of around 55%, and places like Romania where home ownership rates are around 96%. There are a huge number of factors that impact home ownership across the world, from cultural aspects to also legislation that, for instance, protects renters, and also the ability to have access to safe, warm, social housing as well. There are places where it is a badge of honor to buy land and buy your own house, and that's the only way you're going to get a home. Another factor that can impact home ownership is obviously the house price to income ratio. So if you're living in somewhere like New York and it might cost you $1 million to get a 1-bedroom flat, even if you are on £100,000 a year or $100,000 a year, you're still not going to be able to afford that $1 million apartment. Whereas you could be somewhere quiet or somewhere that's less expensive. You can get a property for $100,000 a year. You're on $30,000 a year. That property price ratio to your income ratio is much more balanced and also much more affordable. There are a number of different factors that can impact home ownership across the world, across countries, and also within countries. Some cities are far more expensive than others. Another thing I thought would be worthwhile considering and having a chat about is, does having and owning a home make you more happy? Now, if you look at the World Happiness Report, some of the countries that are ranked the highest in happiness actually have lower rates of home ownership. Sweden, Denmark, Austria, these are some of these Nordic countries that have lower rates of home ownership, around 55%, but these countries rank higher when it comes to happiness. Now, I'm sure that there are a number of different factors, but I think a lot of them probably aren't so stressed out about where they're going to live, probably because they have lower populations in their country. But don't at me, I don't know. I'm not from Denmark. I don't like the cold. Okay, so let's take a look at the pros and cons when it comes to being a renter as well as being a buyer, because both have their goods and they're bad. So let's look at being a buyer. I think the one thing that people love at the idea of buying is asset appreciation. That is the idea, is you buy a house now, it's an asset, and it's going to be worth $1 million in the future if you bought it for like 100 grand today. Now, that doesn't always happen. This is not always guaranteed, but there is the term safe as houses. Houses are known for being a stable investment because a lot of people need houses. But please know, your house is not an investment if you cannot generate revenue from it. You get to be your owner. Nobody can tell you what to do. If you want to paint a wall, if you want to hang a mirror, if you want to hang a window, you don't hang windows. But whatever you want to do, you're in control. You get to be the boss. No one gets to tell you what to do. So if you want to do a switcheroo in your house, you can do that. Being a property owner also gives you stability. You know where you live, you know if you can afford it, you know that someone else cannot choose to just kick you out because they feel like it. As long as you can keep up with your mortgage, as long as you can keep up with what is required, you own that land and it's yours forever. But let's talk about some of the cons when it comes to being a homeowner. It is expensive. It is actually very expensive, and I'm going to show you some maths. It's actually more expensive to be a homeowner in the short time. By the time you take on saving for a deposit, some of the legal costs that are involved in owning a property, stamp duty if you buy a property over a certain threshold, fixing things when they break down because you're responsible for, it can add up. You are liable for all of these costs that you cannot necessarily always plan for, and even some of the costs you do plan for. There is no one else that you can look to help you when the boiler breaks down. That is on you. Number 2, it's illiquid. A property is not like a bank. You can't just put a card into the letterbox and expect to get money out. It could take a year to sell a house. It could take 6 weeks to sell a house. There's no guarantees. If you are someone who is in debt, in need of cash quickly, getting it out of your house can be very, very difficult. You are responsible for absolutely everything. The good, the bad, the ugly. You've got to keep the maintenance. That's if the roof starts leaking, or the window's broken, or the pipes are flooded, or something happens. Something's always happened. You're responsible. You need to become Bob the Builder. Owning a property requires a large upfront investment. That means years of saving for a deposit, years of trying to get the money together. And even once you get the money together, sometimes there are all these additional mounting costs that you didn't know that you were aware of. You might have been able to use the money that you initially invested in the property on something that could create an even higher rate of return than the house that you live in. Another con when it comes to being a homeowner is that once you've put a lot of money in, your heart, your soul, your blood, sweat and tears, you are unlikely to want to move, and it definitely gets very expensive moving, particularly before the first 5 years of you living in that property. You may be less likely to take risks, less likely to take an opportunity abroad, less likely to even leave the city or town that you're in because you are stuck with this house. That might also limit your opportunities when it comes to living in a global world in 2020 and onwards. Now let's compare it to renting. What are the pros of renting? Renting is relatively cheap in the shorter term, but also for at least within a 5-year period of time. You pay your rent, you pay a deposit, and if you don't mess up the house, you get your deposit back and you've only paid for living in that house. There are only things such as moving in fees or the fees that you might have to pay to an agent, but those are relatively low in comparison to home ownership. You can move anywhere in the world you want to. Once your lease is up and you're like, I'm tired, I want to move to Germany, you can do that. You know, you have the opportunity to up and leave depending on the terms of your contract, and that means that you have a little bit more flexibility. There is much less financial responsibility when it comes to being a renter. You do not have to pay, hopefully you do not have to pay for when something happens to the property or something breaks down. You can pick up the phone to the agent, to the landlord, and get them to fix it, and they are obliged and they need to sort things out for you. Now, what are the cons when it comes to renting? Even though it's cheaper in the beginning and in the long run, it can get expensive because you do not have as much much control over the rent if you love a property. At the end of a lease, a landlord can decide to up the rent and you aren't in control of what happens there. Another con is that you can be told to up and leave and you have no choice. A landlord can give you a notice and say, it's time for you to go. You've got to go. I want to sell a house. I don't own it anymore. There's lots of different things that a landlord can do. And I know that for a lot of people, it's not great to feel out of control and you can always feel like you're living slightly on edge. But there is a positive. There's always property available for you to rent if you have enough money. And another thing that happens, if you are renting, it is very difficult for you to be able to save for a deposit. However, again, do you actually need a deposit? I'm gonna go ahead and explore that with a little bit of a financial example. Let us do a little bit of maths. We've got Sharon and we've got Michelle. So let's assume that Michelle has decided that, yep, I'm gonna buy a property. She's got some money saved and she finds a beautiful 1-bedroom house in the city of London for £300,000. That would be great. And she decides to get a 25-year mortgage with a 5-year fixed rate and she puts down a 10% deposit. That fixed rate being 2.29%. Let's assume. Her upfront costs are number one, the 30,000 for the deposit. Number two, product costs. So usually when you get a mortgage, there's like an £1,000 fee or there are different costs associated, but let's assume it's £1,000. And then let's assume that she spends another 1,500 on legal and surveying. Her monthly repayment in the first 5 years at this fixed rate would be about £1,183 per month. Now, when you add building insurance, some of the costs associated with home properties, such as maintenance, this can come in around an additional 1% of the value of a property. So let's assume that that number is £3,000. And let's just do building costs of £30 per month. So after 5 years, if you add all of that up, her total cost in 5 years is actually £120,280. So that is how much it has cost her to be a homeowner in that amount of time. Now let's compare her to Sharon. She isn't sure about being a property owner. She thinks that she might want to move around. She might want to do some other things. So she sticks to the idea of being a renter. If she has a comparable flat in London, her monthly rent could be about £1,200. She'll spend zero money on a deposit, besides the deposit that she will get back because it's protected by the deposit protection scheme, zero money on conveyancing, zero money on buildings and insurance, and zero on maintenance, but she could do some decorating if she decided to. Her total costs over 5 years are £72,000. Michelle and Sharon both live in a similar property for a similar amount of time, but Michelle has ended up spending £48,000 more than Sharon as a homeowner. Now, I know what some of you guys are thinking, that Michelle ends up owning the property. Yes, she does end up owning a property. But after 5 years, what happens if she wants to move? How does she make up that £48,000? And can she? Now, if the property has gone up in value and it's gone up by over £48,000, great, she's quids in. If the market has stayed exactly the same or has even gone down, which it does happen, she's actually ended up losing out in comparison to renting. Now, as long as she's happy, it's the home she wants to be in, that is not a problem. But relying on the idea of properties going up and down, particularly when it comes to short amounts of time, is not a good way to look at a financial calculation when it comes to being a homeowner versus a renter. For example, in the last 5 years in London alone, properties have only gone up by 0.35%. And the average price of a flat in London has gone down by literally minus 5.7%. According to the property website Zoopla, who actually buy and sell properties in London. House prices and house values do fluctuate. There is no guarantee on what the market is going to do, particularly in the short term. There is no simple answer to whether you should rent or whether you should buy, and it really is up to your personal circumstances. Some of the things you need to consider, and I think one of the number one things you need to consider is, will you want to move, and will you want to move soon? And we live in a world where people are working from flipping barley and working on yachts and moving around the world. Today is not the same as it used to be. People used to stay in really stable jobs and work in a 30-year career. That isn't the case anymore. So there was a recent study done by Deloitte of over 10,000 millennials. I can't say millennials. And they found that 72% gave the answer that they couldn't see themselves in the same job that they are in for the next 5 years. So if you want to move to another country, how are you going to do that if you're a homeowner? If you're young, in your 20s and in your 30s, without a family, with a lot of opportunity before you, that potentially locking yourself into a property might not be the wisest choice, because it doesn't allow you to have the freedom and flexibility to maybe pursue alternative opportunities and pursue alternative careers, especially if your resources are going to be tight and if you put everything into home ownership. Another thing you want to consider is, what else could you do with that money? Given the example that I gave you, there was a difference of £48,000 and the initial investment of £30,000. Imagine if you were renting, but you were able to turn that £30,000 into £300,000, or that £48,000, you spent that on a course or invested it into yourself and were able to double, quadruple, and throuple your money. That money that you might have sunk into a property that isn't an asset until you are able to make money from it could have been spent on making money in other ways. And I know that a lot of people see property as an investment. I use property as an investment. It is one form of investment. There are multiple forms of investment, and particularly some forms of investment that are a little bit cheaper, but do have slightly more risk, I would say. A good example of seeing how much a property is an investment: from 2009 to 2019, home prices in the US have doubled. However, the stock market has actually tripled in value in that same amount of time. If you had put £100 or £1,000 into the stock market over that same period of time, your money would have tripled, which is more than what would have happened if you had bought a property for the same amount of money, which you couldn't have done, but you could have put the money into the stock market. However, home ownership in general is something that is a longer term investment. They don't say safe as houses for no reason. People always need a home, and if you are someone who needs a home, you need stability, yes, it's definitely a good idea for looking for that place. But in my personal opinion, I would say do not rush. Do not rush for it to, one, be an investment. There are other ways to invest. If you are going to plan to move every 5 years or every few years, it could end up actually becoming more expensive. I would also say don't worry about keeping up with the Joneses, doing things that everybody else is doing. If Elon Musk is being a renter, maybe it's okay if you are as well for a season. Woo, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Lots of information there. I hope I wasn't too rambly, and I'm not trying to be judgy. I just wanted to provide an alternative opinion. I consider myself to be someone who's into finance, into investing, into like living my best life, but giving factual information, because I think a lot of the information that is out there, or things that we've been told, isn't always right, and it's okay to have an alternative perspective. Listen, I'm here to entertain and provide a little education and some food for thought. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video, and in the meantime, I will catch you all later. Bye.